Hi, my name is Lisa Scott, and today we are going to be talking about the art of kilt making. But before we get started, I wanted to make sure that we thank some of our sponsors for these events. The Arizona Commission of the Arts, the Flagstaff Arts Council, the Flagstaff Community Foundation, Coconino County, and the City of Flagstaff. So, what we're going to talk about today is what I like to refer to as the dying art of kilt making. Kilt making originated way back hundreds of years ago, but it was all done by hand. Kilts today are still made by hand, but predominantly more on the sewing machine. So what you're getting is not an actual handmade kilt product. We also have differences between different types of kilts. There are two different types of kilts that are out there today. One is your standard kilt, which looks about like this. The tartan is very dark in color. Of course, each clan has a different type of tartan, so they have different variations of colors. And they also vary in shades of color. The other is a highland dancing kilt. And if you notice on this kilt, that's on this particular dummy, this is a highland dancing kilt. And if you notice, the difference is there's a lot of white in the kilt. These are called dress kilts or dress tartans. And this is what was required for a highland dancer to be able to compete in a highland dancing competition. They also come in various colors and weights, but a standard highland dancing kilt is about 11-ounce kilt, and it weighs anywhere from 8 to 10 pounds. So a dancer who's up on stage, you know, with everything that they are doing as far as their dance, they have to add an extra 8 to 10 pounds. So the book, The Art of Kilt Making, that is by Elsie Stumeyer. You can get this book anywhere. You should be able to get it on Amazon. She used to do workshops in showing you and demonstrating how to make a kilt from start to finish. I don't know if those workshops exist anymore, but this is a very good source for learning how to make a kilt from start to finish. Now, getting into other types of kilts, this is a man's kilt, and it is made straight up and down. You can also notice that when you are looking at the back, the pleats are designed, when you're looking at the back, you're also looking at the front. So they should be the same from the front and the back. And the only difference is there are pleats. You can make these pleats as wide as a ½ inch, or you can make them even wider. As you're making wider kilts, you use less yardage, and they become lighter to wear. This one happens to have wider pleats in it for the sole purpose of using less yardage. However, when you get to a highland dancing kilt, the pleats on the back are a ½ inch wide. And the reason for it is because the way that these kilts are carried, you want to see what is called a distinctive swing off the back of the kilt. And to help demonstrate that, I've got some photos here of a kilt that I made for a particular dancer, and this was her in competition. And you can tell that a well-made kilt has got lots of swing. So here's another demonstration of how that swing is demonstrated. So this one's got a lot of swing to it. Okay, so now we know the importance of the pleats and how it lays on the back of the kilt. Now, on the front of the kilt, now most highland dancers today are girls, and so it's a little bit not as easy to make a girl's kilt as it is to make a boy's kilt, because girls are shaped. So this you have to take a lot into consideration of where you're pulling and tugging, and then also making sure that the aprons are shaped to where it's smaller at the waist, wider at the hips. And this book demonstrates how to make the difference between a regular kilt and a dancer's kilt as well. So the first thing when we go to making kilts is being able to notch out the fabric. So the fabric comes in what's called a double yard. And most of the time you can take, for an 8-yard kilt, you can buy 4 double yards of fabric, and then you cut it down the middle. Because everybody is not going to be 30 inches long. which is about half the size. So one of the things that we have to do when we're sitting there and measuring out the kilt is being able to mark it off. So when you're looking at the front and then you look at the back, they're the same. So what we end up doing is we have to sit there and take it and we mark it. So the pleats end up being they end up looking like you're really looking at about this wide when you're looking at the back side, inside of the kilt, which is where a lot of the weight comes from. So once it's all marked, then we sit there and make pleats, one pleat at a time. And the issue with making a handmade kilt is being able to push on one side, pull back on the other. So it puts a lot of work on your hands, and your hands will probably hurt after a while. But it takes about 60 hours in total from start to finish, from measuring out the kilt until the kilt is complete. The longest piece of it is the pleats. This particular kilt, I think, has about 23 pleats. So you have to be able to make sure that the bottom here, when you're looking at it, all the lines line up all the way across. And some of these do. Most of them do, some of them don't. And if they don't line up, then you have to pretty much take the stitch out and start all over. So, but that's where the bulk of the work comes from in making a kilt. And then all the other extra stuff on it is the belt, the buckles, belt loops if you're making a male kilt, and then of course the fringe that goes on the front apron. Now, another thing that most people don't know about kilts is the pleats on the back. There are also different kinds of pleats aside from what you see here, aside from what you see on this kilt, and that's called a military pleat. Military pleats the pleats are only about maybe a ½ inch wide, and when you look at the back, all you do is see straight lines going across all the way down based on the tartan itself. So they don't take into consideration that when you're looking at the front, that you're also looking at the back. And they're very distinct, and you'll see those mostly in pipe bands. So next we're going to talk about the do's and don'ts of how to wear a kilt. So the length of a kilt, if it's properly made and measured, will go from the waist, and it will be no lower than the top of the knee. And of course, always the big joke is, what do you wear under a kilt? Do you go commando, or do you go a little bit more discreet? That is completely up to the person who wears the kilt. It's of no disrespect, because nobody's going to be looking anyway. And also, along with a men's kilt, is called the kilt pin. Now these come in different variations of styles, but they're generally going to be worn right around the corner of the front apron, where the fringe is, and that is basically to hold the kilt in place. So if it happens to be a windy day, your kilt's not going to be flying up, especially depending on what you're wearing underneath. Also, the kilt is worn with the apron in the front where the fringe is. This is the front of the kilt. This is the back. You do not wear a kilt with the pleats in the front. That is very disrespectful, and you'd probably get some weird looks if you were walking down wearing a kilt with the pleats in the front. Okay, so also, not only is there a difference between different types of kilts, but there's also what's called a kiltie. Now, most little kids' kilts that you would make, you're not going to make with a full set of fabric. So it's called a kiltie because it's got less than maybe 2 or 3 yards. It's got only a few pleats in the back, and the pleats are pretty wide. There's also what's called the pattern that's on these kilts is what is called a set. Each clan tartan is all different. Their sets are different. Some are very small like this. Some are very large like this particular pattern on this dress kilt. Now this is a Scott kilt and this is a Forsyth kilt. Some clans have multiple variations of their kilts, so they can their sets are also going to be of varying size. This tartan here, this is also a Scott kilt. Now it's got the same type of set pattern, but it's much smaller than what is on this particular pattern. But it's the same clan tartan. This just happens to be a dance kilt, and this one happens to be a regular tartan pattern. There are also different types of kilts or patterns of the tartans. One is called, of course, the dress pattern, which is worn by Highland dancers. And then you also have hunting tartans, which have more colors of nature that you would normally find. There are also versions of clan tartans that are considered to be modern and some that are considered to be ancient, depending on how old the tartan is, or the pattern is. So the set, of course, is in the tartan is the pattern that you would see. Okay. And like I said, the clan tartans can actually have different variations in their design. This happens to be a modern tartan for the Forsyth. Forsyth happens to have a modern and an ancient due to the fact that many hundreds of years ago, the Forsyth clan disbanded, and when they came back to be the clan again, then they redid their tartan. So that's why they have two. The Scott tartan, there are 10 variations. Sir Walter Scott has his own design of his own kilts. So, and you're going to find this depending on what clan you belong to and what kind of versions of tartans, and then you can pretty much select which you like best. So there are several uses of tartan fabric that can be done, not just for making kilts, but for other costuming as far as Highland dancing is concerned. It's used for national costumes. It can also be made into women's sashes for the purpose of their clan. And there's also Daughters of Scotia. They have a different type of sash where they also use their own tartan fabric as well. So you can do all kinds of things that you would ever do with any other kind of fabric, but if it's something that's say along the lines of Celtic and in the clan tradition, those are some good resources for the use of tartan. You can also find tartan fabric at a lot of your vendors that are part of Highland Games. Some of them actually will carry the tartan fabric on bolts. You can also find finished tartans in possibly your clan's tartan pattern. A lot of them will carry them in stock at a Highland Games event. You can also get them directly from a weaver, either in Scotland. Canada's got some good weavers and good resources there. I don't know if there are any here in the U.S. as far as weavers go, but those are two very good resources for finding tartan fabric. And if you're wanting to learn how to make a kilt, obviously you're not going to be able to learn how to do one in a very short educational setting. However, there are kilt makers out there that can at least provide instruction, or you can contact your local Celtic organization and they may have resources for those that either can make the kilts for you or can teach you how to make one. So that is all I have for this session. I hope that you're able to get a good source or sense of what is involved in kilts, either making them, buying them, or whatever source that you need them for. Thank you.